Hello and welcome to Global Lava. Good afternoon. Global Lava presents Thursday's happy hour series is called Funding and Expansion in Africa. My name is Darren Ng, and as the new executive director of LAVA, your Los Angeles Venture Association, welcome and thank you for joining us today. Since most of you watching are not members of LAVA yet, you probably should know a little bit about LAVA and how we can help you. LAVA is a membership association dedicated to supporting what I like to call the giant mesh network of communities that make up the Los Angeles startup venture ecosystem. Our role is to facilitate communication and collaboration, and most importantly, deal flow among the various and varied nodes of this ecosystem network. You'll be glad to hear that you have joined us at an opportune time in LAVA's 36-year history to become a LAVA member. LAVA is currently in the midst of a metamorphosis. To serve you and the community better, we have added 2 new advisory boards consisting of only VCs and only angels respectively. And we have strengthened our community leadership and our committee roles. The result is a host of new programs and initiatives. Today's event is an extension of one of those initiatives as a Global Lava program. And while Global Lava has quite a history, our new Global Lava committee co-chairs, Michael McClune and Sharon Raybinder, have developed quite a roster of upcoming events by deploying this new approach. I welcome you to reach out to me, Michael, or Sharon to learn more about ways you can get involved or benefit from membership or sponsorship to LAVA. But for now, in the interest of time, I'll get to introducing Michael and Sharon. Michael will be our host for today's event, and he can introduce the rest of our guests. So without further ado, I will bring Michael back online here.
All right, hello everybody. Yeah. Thanks, Darren. And on behalf of Sharon, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. It's our pleasure not only to have this esteemed panel, but to be able to bring the community of startups and the supporters of startups and high growth companies, something that typically you're not going to find elsewhere. Everybody's always looking for new sales, and there are a lot of different ways to do it. Now we find ourselves, in particular today, what was it, 32.9%? Our economy just went down this quarter. Everybody's looking to replace sales. And so today we want to move up the topic of Africa through our Thursday happy hour, slate of events, because 7 out of the 10 fastest growing global economies are in Africa. And there's 1 billion consumers there. So we're excited to be able to walk you through, via our panelists, the expertise of how and where to find the public sector, the fundings and the grants and the support services and the initiatives, and then how to implement them here. And then we have the panelists to help deploy everything that you learn here on continent. And then parallel to all that, we're going to do a real life exercise with Shakira of how to use South Africa as an anecdotal example, as the gateway to the entire continent and those other 7 fastest growing markets in the world and 1 billion customers. So we have amazing panelists that I'll have our moderator Brionne introduce in a second. So I think the big thing to take away is, as we go through this, is the profits tremendously outweigh the risks when doing business in Africa and with Africa. I was on a panel this morning on East Africa, and they were talking about Ethiopia. Ethiopia has 100 million people. So if you add up California and Texas and New York and Florida, you have basically the population of Ethiopia. And what's interesting from a strategy and a marketing point of view is, for the last 5 or 6 years, the median age of Ethiopia, 100 million people, has been under 20 years old. So if you can get to that population now and make your partnerships and your deals and your sales, you're going to have some lucrative decades ahead of you. So on behalf of Sharon, who works for the government of France and helps initiate and facilitate trade between the US and France, and myself, I represent the International Business Accelerator, where we help startups and high growth companies go across any border and thrive. We do it quickly and compliantly and profitably. I will turn it over to Brionne, the Senior Director of the United States Chamber of Commerce and the expert and global policy leader of the Chamber, and particularly the US Africa Business Center out of the Chamber. So Brionne, thank you.
You're muted, Brionne.
Thank you. Well, good evening. Michael, thank you for that warm introduction. Thank you, Darren, for the overview of Global Lava. Thank you, Shakira. I am delighted to be joined. My name is Brionne, as was introduced, with the US Africa Business Center at the US Chamber of Commerce, and we share the enthusiasm that Michael conveyed with 7 of the 10 fastest growing economies on the African continent. We've been seeing over the course of the better part of a decade that we have facilitated our programming on the African continent to deepen trade and investment and to strengthen ties with great companies like yours and to develop the startup ecosystem across the African continent. And we share the excitement and the enthusiasm about the opportunities, notwithstanding all of the tremendous risks, but also the moment that we find ourselves in. With great challenge comes great opportunity. And so that's why I'm delighted and really thrilled to welcome a dynamic group of panelists through which you'll hear from about the actual tools that you can access in order to foster business growth and to access financing. I'm going to just share a little bit of background about each of them, and then we're going to jump straight into questions. Eugene Cornelius is going to talk about the myriad of federal initiatives and resources available from DC, where he led the Small Business Administration's 21 export centers around the US, and he'll share with you some of the tools available to the business community. And then we're also going to hear from Shakira Moten, who is the Trade Commissioner at the South African Consulate. I know I'm really excited to hear from Shakira because the Chamber works very collaboratively with the South African government. And so on the South African side, you're going to hear about where in a thriving and dynamic market, there's a safe gateway to the continent due to the numerous similarities in culture, language, business norms, rule of law. We want to hear from Shakira about the opportunities in South Africa. And then you'll also hear from Mike Sesway, who will share insights from assisting companies enter Africa and to navigate some of the risks across markets in Africa. And so without further ado, and because we're wanting to make sure that we get to your questions, I'm just going to jump straight in. So let me maybe just pose this initial question let's start with Eugene here. What is the best way for a US startup to quickly and safely expand into the African market? And as you think about that, what needs to be in place domestically? And then what needs to be in place in Africa? Eugene?
That is exploring exporting in any fashion is first to have an export business plan. You need to first go to the small business development centers. You can look them up at sba.gov. You can go or just Google Small Business Development Center. Every state has one. They're linked to major universities and particularly graduate schools, and they really know how to put together a export business plan. Once you have that, the next step you need to make is to contact the United States Export Assistance Centers. And the reason you want to go there is because they're 3-in-1. There you will have the U.S. Commerce, the commercial services, who will help you identify foreign buyers. You will have the SBA that will help you finance your sales in a foreign market. And you will have Exim Bank that will help foreign buyers finance buying your product and also giving you and them credit insurance. Those are key things that stop people from getting into the market and really prepare people for commercials. Now, when you talk about what kind of products and services you have, when I talk about SBA's financing, the SBA has 3 different products. And those products really work for the whole life cycle of you from walking in the door, never doing any exporting to being the most advanced exporter that you could possibly be. And it provides different categories of funding for workers, for working capital, for prior pre-development and marketing share, getting into the market and doing what you need to do to get on the ground and get up and running. And for facilities and equipment and supplies that you may need in order to make that transition in the logistical areas that you move. So you want to make sure that you're looking at what you need, when you need it, and how you need it. And those things are really met with that business plan. So we have seen that 1 in 5 businesses that tend to put their feet into the export centers or in export world tend to not succeed in the first 3 years. And mainly because they didn't do 1 or 2 of those 2 steps. So it's not that they don't have the talent, it's not that they don't have the product that sells, but they weren't prepared for the market. And so that would be the 2 things that I would say.
Thank you for those insights. Maybe turning to Shakira next. Shakira, you know, we hear a lot about the opportunities that exist in South Africa. We know that there is, you know, a robust and long-standing bilateral trade and investment relationship. Can you share, you know, what from the other side, from the South African perspective, does the South African government have in place in order to support business to thrive, and what opportunities are there that some of the folks who are on the call should be looking at seriously?
Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about South Africa. As you can see, my background is indicative of where I would like to be, which is somewhere on the coast in South Africa. We have a huge coastline which covers both the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean. But to go into South Africa and what we offer, it necessitates me to just describe South Africa to you. South Africa is actually one of the most, if not the most diversified economy in Africa. We have a very strong financial system with our stock exchange in terms of capitalization is large, one of the largest in Africa, if not the largest. And then in terms of the World Bank Logistics Performance Index, we are ranked #1 in South Africa. So this means that we have world-class infrastructure and logistics. We also have a very young population. 66% of our population is under 35. That means not just huge purchasing power, but also availability for labor. We have abundant natural resources, and our rule of law is progressive. We have a progressive constitution and independent judiciary. We also focus strongly on protection of investors. So another thing that's very important to us is protection of intellectual property, copyright, patent protection. We're members of the World Intellectual Property Association. We have a great quality of life in South Africa. So many Americans have settled in South Africa and talk about the weather, the friendliness of the people, the cultural affiliation and hospitality. And it's just a very easy move from the US to South Africa. And the government has set a really enabling environment for all companies, foreign companies, to set up in South Africa. That's why we say that if you're looking not just to, as a first step to enter Africa, look into South Africa, not just for South Africa as a market, but entering the rest of the African market. If you look at South Africa's presence on the African continent, we have major South African companies in pharmaceuticals, healthcare, financial services, and retail, who actually are so well integrated into the region that they're the best who can advise and support further joint ventures into the rest of Africa. We regard them as African pioneers. And another mechanism that the South African government has implemented is that in 2016, my Commerce Ministry has started a division called Trade and Investment Africa. And the primary focus of this division is to focus on increasing intra-African trade, and to work on the economic strategy for more integration between South Africa and the rest of Africa. And there's a host of financial incentives and non-financial support that we offer to companies partnering with South Africa to enter into those markets. And I just have to talk about two other very important aspects in terms of market access. The one is the African Growth and Opportunities Act. This covers over 7,000 tariff lines and allows entry of goods into the US from many African countries duty-free. And it covers chemicals, pharmaceuticals, the automotive sector, capital equipment, clothing, textile, footwear, leather, agro-processing and agriculture. And that's huge. That's really huge. We think a great benefit that you won't be able to get from other regions. And then the last bit that I would love to touch on is the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. This is massive. This is the largest grouping of countries since the World Trade Organization. It includes 54 countries. And there's a plan eventually for the free and ease of movement of goods, services, and people. So one of the major challenges in Africa is that we weren't trading enough with each other. So African countries have decided to come together and see how we can address those challenges. And it's a huge opportunity for American companies, just phenomenal in terms of accessing every different African market and getting a foot into South Africa. So thank you.
Thank you, Shakira. One of the things that we pay attention to in our bilateral relationship at the Chamber in South Africa is also the deep investment that's been made in the one-stop shop and the facilitation that's been done and the great work at the Department of Trade and Industry to really smooth the path for US business to enter the South African market. We estimate about 600 companies, American companies, are already doing business. And that creates a foothold and an opportunity for more business to thrive, and we'd like to see that expand. So
one more thing. Yes, so you mentioned trade and investment in South Africa. So what we've also done is we've located them in every state, in every province in South Africa, so that there's ease of assistance with easing all of the bottlenecks and support and aftercare facilitation. And we've been ranked globally as one of the best performing in terms of the investment facilitation. Thank you.
Thank you. And putting that enabling regulatory environment in place and ensuring that that support exists all over the country is absolutely critical, as we've heard from many of our business members. So Mike, turning to you, you've helped smooth the path for companies to enter Africa, and you have a lot of on-the-ground experience through your consulting and advisory support. So what do you think needs to be in place in order for business to thrive, and what are some sort of nuggets that you can share from some of your experiences doing business on the continent?
No, thank you very much for having me. Actually, just like my colleagues Eugene and Shakira mentioned, being a part of those programs here in the U.S. and having the backing of the United States, government to a certain extent, as you enter the markets is very big. But two things that can't be missed when you're going into African markets. One is relationships. Business is still across the continent is still built on relationships. So you as the potential exporter would still need to build those relationships and have your face being recognized as being part of that product. Of course, you need to decide where in the value chain that you want to be a part of, whether you want to sell, put it on the ship and then say, farewell, I'll get my return sometime later, or do you want to be a part of actually getting your product onto the shelves or into the marketplaces to serve the actual marketplace in Africa? The second thing I want to mention is local context. That sometimes some products, they struggles to convert itself from a marketing standpoint from the global north countries to possibly a global south context. Making sure that your products are built for the market that you're entering into. That is something that my consulting firm, Global South by South, that we work towards, that we help our clients to make sure that their products are one that can be received well in the market that they're trying to choose to go into. So I would just say those two things, local context and making sure that relationship stays number one, will help you tremendously as you enter the African markets.
Great. That's excellent guidance and really sets us up nicely for a robust set of questions. And I already see some coming into the chat box. But before getting to that, Eugene, you started talking about the various tools that are available. And we know that there's been a scaling up of many of the use of those tools through the US government's Prosper Africa initiative. Can you just kind of get down into the brass tacks on the financing side? What are some of the common pitfalls that you see with some of the companies that are accessing those tools, and how would you navigate around some of those common pitfalls?
That's an excellent question. And one of the key things that we see is that the small business is not prepared or educated to speak the language of the financer. And that's why an export business plan is different than your general business plan. And you really need to not only get it done, and some people will go out and pay to get it done and then not even read it themselves. You better know that better than you know your name. And that will kill you more than anything. The other thing is when you're dealing with countries, you need to go to Exim Bank. Exim Bank has a scale and it has the various risk factors that you're playing in, from sovereignty to money, liquidity, and all the things that really transactions that you don't necessarily think about when you're dealing domestically, or even when you're dealing in North America with China and Mexico. Canada and Mexico. So you may want to look at that when you are looking at how solid is their currency? How do I get paid? What is the time duration of that? Is it on a 90-day account receivable or account payable situation? Those things you should know. And believe it or not, Exim Bank, the US Exim Bank has a scale. It has a chart that will help you navigate that as well. But when you get into the finances, you need to really understand your use of sources of funds. People tend to just say, I need debt, or I need to take on debt, and you may not need to take on debt. First of all, you need to ask your question. How much debt can I carry? And how much do I need debt, or do I need equity? And if you need debt, what is the guarantees? What do I have? Do I have low management experience and background among my subject matter experts? They may be subject matter experts, but do they know management and business acumen? Do I have the collateral for these loans? Do I have what it takes for the duration of repayment in my cash flow? These are very key issues that stop, prevent, and in some cases leads to default if you have not really forecast them out and really dealt with what you're dealing with. And that's why SBA has 3 different loans, and SBA provides in the international market a 90% guarantee versus its regular 75 to 80% guarantee, which is very valuable. You want to make sure that you have that kind of guarantee going into the door. And like I said, that's from anything from working capital to inventory purchases to facilities to supply that inventory purchases, and even logistical travel to get from country A to country C.
That's excellent. Well, we've talked, and Mike, you brought up the important point of also building relationships, and we know that is critical. So can you talk a little bit about, the tactical tools and tips for selecting the right partners, identifying the right partners, putting the proper financing plans in place to structure deals? What are some of the kind of recommended best practices? Mike, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Yeah. You're on mute, Mike. Mike's still on mute here.
He's frozen, I think.
It looks like Mike's video and Mike are both off for some reason, and I can't turn them back on for him.
Okay. Well, Mike, I can see you. It looks like you're moving fine on my screen. Maybe hang up and come back in. In the meantime, I'll turn over to Shakira. Shakira, can you tell us just on the support for companies and kind of any tools that you use on the relationship development side? I mean, I think it can be really challenging to kind of navigate one's way through, the entry points. So where does one start?
I think, as I mentioned before, it's so important to make contact with the South African Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. A lot of companies venture into a new country without any vetting or without just not making contact with the local government. And we're actually a very useful point of contact. For example, we have our highest number of offices globally in Africa. Our focus in the world obviously is on Africa, and as you said, on building relationships. So we have representation in many of those countries, and it's so important for us to coordinate in terms of regular interaction, in terms of trade show participation, market intelligence, building a relationship with those governments in those different African countries. And we also provide a lot of support, not just through grants for productivity, manufacturing, and export marketing, but also through our development finance institutes, the Development Bank of South Africa, and the Industrial Development Corporation. And these are available not just to South African companies, but to any company that registers in South Africa and also is looking to partner with a South African, which is obviously to your benefit, because when you enter into a market, you would like to work with somebody who understands the dynamics of that market. So those are some of the financial and non-financial tools that we offer. And very important, we do have such an impressive footprint on the rest of the continent, because that's key to us. We believe that in growing our economy, it's important to grow our neighbors and ensure that we uplift the entire continent together, because together we are much stronger. Thank you.
Terrific. Well, I want to make sure that we utilize our time wisely and get to your questions. And the way I'm going to handle the questions is, if you wouldn't mind, just use the question and answer feature. I know that there's also an active chat box, but I'm going to be taking questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom. And I'll start with this one, and maybe it's best directed to you, Eugene. Would you know of incubators and accelerators that the person who's asked, it's Teresa Dunes, could link to and start developing relationships anywhere on the continent?
I say the question again.
Yes, it's a question about incubators and accelerators. And it's on any knowledge of incubators or accelerators that you know about to begin to develop relationships with anywhere on the continent.
On the continent of the United States?
No, on the African continent.
I do not. I do know that the Ministry of Economic Development, Minister Zulu, her team, if you reach out to her office, she has not only, she's in South Africa as well, but she not only has a list of those kinds of facilities in South Africa, but she has them for most of South Africa, Southern Africa. I am aware of that. I do know that the Egyptian government, Ministry of Economic Development, AMA, has the one listings for all of the MENA area, the Midwest and Northern Africa states. So if you go to those two facilities, they're most likely to tell you on the continent of Africa where to go for the incubators and accelerators.
May I add that from the South African side? Yes, so actually we do have some relationships with multinationals, and we have some relationship with the academia and private sector in different provinces like Gauteng. We also have our own special economic zones where we have a division at the department that focuses on incubators and incubation hubs. So if Teresa could reach out to me, I could share with her all of the information because it covers a broad spectrum of industries. Technology related is key. And there's a strong focus on women-owned and minority-owned businesses and incubating them in those tech startups. So thank you.
Excellent. I see Mike is back with us.
Yes, I am back.
Mike, thank you. You can either answer that question that we had earlier about relationships, but also link to this question about incubators and accelerators, because I think people are looking for meaningful partnership and some suggestions to go to. Go ahead.
Yes, just great question about how to build that relationship. I would say that if you have the ability to target a nation, one particular country that you want to do business in, one really good thing to do is to go and possibly go on a trade mission so that you can be there, you can see for yourself what the lay of the land looks like. You can start to meet some of the people, get a feel for the pulse of the marketplace, and then that'll help you make a more informed decision on where you want to actually enter your products into the marketplace. Another thing that I would also suggest is possibly locally, depending on where you live, if there's a local consulate in the nation that you know you want to target for your market. There's typically events that go on at the different consulates around the country. Just make some connections there, make some connections with the people who are there to support economic development and growth, and different chambers of commerce as well. That there's their job really to get more business or investment from the United States to their host nation. So definitely I would say do those two things. That would be most helpful.
Yeah, let me add to that, because Mike, you raise a good point. And for those who need resources, there is what we call the STEP grant. And the SBA gives out the STEP grant to states. And if you go to your directors of economic development in your state, you will find that they will provide assistance, monetary assistance for trade missions, and they will host, in some cases, trade missions, depending on the industry and depending on the type of service you have. So before you go out there, make sure you're exploring all the resources that are available to you. SBA put out over $44 million just for this particular effort to over 30 states that participate in this program. And it's for you, it's for the small business person to do just what Mike is saying. And in addition to paying that resources, they have tutors and mentors that help you with relationship building tactics.
Thank you. I can just add from our experience, and this picks up, Mike mentioned the role of trade delegations and roles of chambers of commerce. And in that respect, the US Africa Business Center maintains active relationships with the 13 registered chambers of commerce that are on the African continent. And I think that when you assess opportunities and relationships and do an ecosystem analysis and determine it really starts with determining which country you want to enter. And making a determination about the country that you want to enter should be staked on whatever product, service you are, exporting, or what you're looking to distribute in country. And in that respect, we can support through our AmChams the opportunities and also help you gain market intelligence to better understand what the landscape looks like for your product or service to scale in that market. An often overlooked resource in country. On the US side, there are trade specialists in over 100 cities across the United States. You should start by checking with the trade specialists. They can help you develop your export assistance strategy. And also just with respect to, the ecosystem for digital services and the regulatory environment, we know that countries that are at the forefront of digital transformation have a regulatory environment that enables that kind of growth. And so even in countries where you have highly restrictive regulatory environments. Countries like Ethiopia that Mike mentioned earlier, which routinely shut off the internet. There have been some very successful examples like Blue Moon, that is an incubator in Ethiopia that actually is helping to facilitate the ecosystem development, notwithstanding some pretty significant constraints. I would also point those who are putting questions into the chat box on digital goods and services to the Silicon Savannah, Kenya, which has a very thriving regulatory ecosystem, and all of the large US tech companies that are already established players in that market, where there are opportunities for partnerships and quite a bit of digital tools that are being developed locally through incubators in universities like the University of Strathmore, the iLab that's in Kenya, and there are a whole host of others. But I think you have to start with understanding the market, understanding, the plan that the country has in place. We know that South Africa, for example, has a very robust digital transformation agenda. And so you can also leverage the resource that we have with Shakira here on the line. And I just want to maybe come back to my questions here and transition to asking about another question that's in the chat. And it's about multilateral institutions. One thing that's being asked is, what role is the United Nations playing in easing trade restrictions between the US companies and African nations? And maybe Shakira, from the government side, you're the best place to answer this. But I'm interested in hearing from anyone else who has thoughts on the panel.
I would say that, from the perspective of the African Growth and Opportunities Act, there's not much restriction on most of the goods and services. Recently, of course, with the new administration, we've been having some challenges on certain goods and services, but we've been having an active dialogue on a bilateral level between the USA. So we are utilizing our relationship individually, and I believe that the US itself is also has been taking an approach of bilateral relationships, with the example of with Kenya. So thank you.
Yeah, I would say that the UN is using its research and development to give statistical data of the impact of multilateral and cross-border commerce and exchange. And they're doing it through their 17 sustainable development goals that they use internationally across the board. And what they're doing is to make sure that supplies and commerce moves across borders to reduce poverty and to build the middle class. And when you look at that, they're doing that through the fact of growth of small businesses and commerce through small businesses, because they know that small businesses employ 90% of the workforce in the world. And so when the UN looks at the fact that we will need 15 million new jobs each year for the next 15 years, and we look at the economies like South Africa with its youth, and we look at Ethiopia with its even younger population, the UN is very instrumental through their research and development department to make sure that these things are happening and easing in a non-political way.
When it comes to easing tariff and non-tariff barriers in African markets, I would only add that the UN, through its sustainable development goals, is at a macro policy level, looking to facilitate a policy environment that can enable growth and trade. And through that sort of macro function and the support that they provide at a technical assistance level in country, that is really the role of the UN. From a tactical standpoint, though, I don't believe that the UN is really the best entry point for business. And so, Mike, I'd love to hear your perspective if that instinct is really on point there.
No, that's a great point. I would say that you're spot on. The UN does a great job in facilitating, like you mentioned, to get rid of some of those non-tariff barriers and so on and so forth. But there's still a little bit of a gap, I would say the last mile between getting these items into the port and then actually into the marketplace and into the hands of the consumer. I think that's where we talked about earlier about relationships and so on and so forth, but it's really going to take that entrepreneur to really get on the ground and create that value chain from the port to the actual marketplace to make it effective. I mean, it's great to have those treaties in place, the different procedures that the UN will bring to the table. And, Eugene mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals, and that's really at the macro sense, but it's going to take that person that's really going to drive home that market or those items or those products or services actually to the marketplace.
Great, thank you. I'm going to come to another question, and it ties to some of the general guidance we've been sharing in terms of navigating the U.S. federal ecosystem. And Eugene, this is probably best put to you, but also I'd like to hear from Shakira on the South African government to U.S. government perspective on this question. How do U.S. federal agencies and local county-based agencies work together to address funding or incentives for business? So Eugene, first to you, and then I'd like to hear from Shakira.
I think the perfect example of that is the International Trade, Council. I should know better because I used to sit on it. And it involves 13 federal agencies. And what we do, when I was with the SBA, we chaired that group. And we look at what are the things that restrict U.S. businesses from going into the market. What U.S. regulations and policies are prohibiting? How do we streamline financial capital, be it investment, be it debt, be it whatever, to help small businesses go in there? So there's a actual working council within the federal government that does that. The second thing I would say is a prime example of that is the STEP program that I was referring to that SBA has that put out $44 million to state grants. It's state export centers grant, and it's for the development and technical assistance, but also for covering costs to go in country and to have mission-based small business activity. So it's to help and to support people doing that. And we work with the local state government, and then the state government has to filter that money down. Let's say they get 5 million or 4 million, then they have to make sure that they're filtering that money down to municipalities by rationale of percentage of population to make sure that their small businesses are being able to access this fund from the federal government. So you do it that way. Then you see it with SBA working with the banks. The fact that we do the 90% guarantee to your regular commercial banks. If you go to any bank in the United States, more than likely they have some participating part with SBA, and we work with the private sector and the banks to guarantee that loan. Let's say you don't have that management experience, but you got the great product, or you don't have that in-country experience and no commercial underwriter wants to lend you that because they don't really know that country, or they don't really know if your product is going to work in that country. SBA takes that grant, takes that guarantee and says, we think she's going to make it and we believe in her. We will back that loan 90%. So that only gives the private sector bank a 10% chance of a loss. So that's how it works. And I want to say how successful that is because I have some numbers and I just want to give them out. For 2019, fiscal year 2019, SBA made 422 loans like that. And that amounted to over $662 million US dollars. And that created over 8,000 jobs because of that guarantee, because of that process. Now, when I talk about the STEP, I want to give you examples of how that worked. We know that our agriculture and our farmers are having a hard time right now. We took some Idaho farmers to Taiwan on the STEP exchange who could not otherwise afford to go over there to sell their beef. And that exchange led to multi-million-dollar contracts with the Taiwan government and private sector investors in Taiwan for our Idaho beef farmers. So these are very successful programs. This is why you want to take that two-step approach I mentioned at the beginning. Get that export business plan, get in there to the UZX and learn about these programs that will be cost efficient and offer guarantees and offer access to capital.
Excellent. Well, we're coming to the end of our program, but before we do, I want to make sure that each of our panelists have an opportunity to share at least one recommendation or point that they'd like to just drive home for all of our panelists. So I'm going to rapid fire, beginning with Shakira.
Thank you. Well, I think the most important thing is to please stay in touch with us and please be in contact. We have a lot of financial and non-financial support that we can offer for those companies that are looking to partner with South Africa. We have a host of incentives covering different industries, and we do work closely together on a state level with the different provinces. And we actually have regular interactions in terms of meetings with the different trade and investment promotion agencies in order to ensure that we coordinate our activities, not just on the national level, but in terms of abroad as well. And we found many successes, including hosting American delegations in South Africa to look at opportunities for collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakira. As a 5-year resident of South Africa, I can absolutely say that I enjoyed my time there and was very impressed by all of the numerous opportunities, and applaud the work that you're doing. Let me ask Eugene, what are your top line recommendations for those on the call?
I would say, as United States citizens and taxpayers, you should take advantage of the available resources your tax dollars has provided you. You should not try to reinvent the wheel. You should not go in without the knowledge, experience, and the backing that is already there to support you. You should take full advantage of that, and you should use that fear of walking into another domain, a new market, and really use it as a channel to push your innovation, because that's what you do.
Excellent. And Mike, over to you.
Yeah, I would say that the demand is definitely there. I mean, the market is growing, just like my colleagues mentioned at the very beginning. Just don't let some negative things that you hear make you shy away from the opportunity. If you're interested in doing it, you can do it. There are people out there, organizations similar to my own, Global South by South, that can help you get your products from the United States into the African markets. I would just say, just be smart about it. There may be some capacity building that you have to do, but trust me, it'll be well worth it.
Excellent. And I'm just going to conclude by sharing where we started, that there's tremendous opportunity across the African continent. Know the market, know your customer, understand the risks, recognize that there's often more perceived risks than actual risks. Yes. And I think that as you go into these environments, really, spend the time getting to know the potential partners. And the resource I leave you with is in the chat box. It is the Prosper Africa Toolkit. It has a suite of different US government tools to support trade and investment across the entire value chain of different products and services and government technical assistance and capacity building, whether it's on deal structuring, deal evaluation, feasibility studies, financing, whatever your need is, there's likely a tool in the Prosper Africa Toolkit that can also help to enable your business to grow and to thrive. You have great resources on this call. I want to thank all of them for their insights and for Global Lava for sponsoring and hosting all of us. And we wish you all of the best of luck as you seek to thrive on the African continent. Thank you.
Great, that was fantastic. Thank you all. Michael, thank you for setting this up today. Are you back? There you are. You are back.
I am. Yeah, I am amazingly grateful. Well, just an expression of gratitude from Sharon, the co-chair, and myself to all the panelists. I just want to reiterate from a high level is that there is a fundamentally collaborative support structure from the federal level to the state level to, 501c3/6s like LAVA that wants to facilitate and support high growth companies doing what they want through growth capital. I have a 501c3 that tries to create jobs and economic development by increasing international trade. And we all work together and we all want to share all of the infrastructure and programs and initiatives and resources and grants, ideally, with all founders and everybody who supports a founder. So thank you, everyone. Brionne, magnificent job of corralling so many outstanding people with so many different levels of expertise and experience. I appreciate that. And so again, on behalf of Sharon and I, back to you, Darren.
Well, great. Thank you, everyone. Brionne, great job hosting and moderating and providing content yourself about Prosper Africa. Eugene, Mike, and Shakira, I love the closing remarks with regard to kind of inspiring the entrepreneurs and all the support network. As Michael just mentioned, LAVA has a lot of support information out there. We have a lot of mentors available. We have referral resources and connections with investors. I'm going to close out by just talking about the upcoming events that we have going. I'm not sure. I'm still trying to learn how to navigate this thing as far as shutting everyone's cameras off, but I will stay on. And we have tomorrow, we have another happy hour event with Digital Media LAVA. We have one of the new agents that's moved from Gersh over to a new talent agency called I think it's Talent X for Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube influencers. And so they'll be managing those, and there'll be interesting discussion about how the entertainment industry is changing. On August 11th, we have LAVA's annual State of VC event, and we have a great lineup. We have Gregory Milken from March Capital, Shameen Walsh, partner at BAM Ventures, Peter Del Grosso from Bryant Steibel, and I believe we have Marlon Nichols coming on board from Mac Ventures as well. So that's a great panel of VCs coming up. On Wednesday, August 12th, the next day, we have our first syndication screening event. It is an invite-only event, but it's on FinTech, and it'll be profiling the CEOs from UNEST and Grow Credit. And then on August 18th, we'll have our Angel VC roundtable on entertainment. So if you're an angel or a VC in the audience and you have an entertainment sector, contact me about getting an invite to that, because that event also is invite only. And I hear that our Canalava group may also be doing an event 2 days later on August 20th. I'll get more information about that, but I believe that's on women in Cana. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you all for supporting LAVA. Feel free to contact me, Michael, Sharon, or anyone else that you can reach on our website, lava.org. And thank you again to all the panelists who I see are still up. Have a great day.